On a desolate stretch of highway that wound through miles of empty desert, a lone trucker named Jack was accustomed to the solitude of the open road. His rig, a massive, rumbling metal behemoth, had seen countless miles and carried him through the darkest nights, but nothing could have prepared him for what he would encounter one fateful evening. The sun had long dipped beneath the horizon, leaving behind a canvas of stars that stretched infinitely above. The highway seemed to stretch ahead forever, bordered by nothing but sand and silence. Jack's radio crackled with static, a dull reminder of his isolation. As the hours ticked away, a heavy weariness settled over him. His eyelids drooped, and the monotony of the road lulled him into a drowsy trance. But just as his head nodded forward, a glint of movement in the rearview mirror jolted him awake. Squinting into the darkness, Jack saw nothing but the empty highway he had just traversed. He chalked it up to exhaustion and turned his attention back to the road ahead. But a growing unease gnawed at his gut, a feeling that he was being watched. Minutes turned to hours, and the feeling of being watched only intensified. Every glance into the rearview mirror revealed nothing. Yet Jack couldn't shake the sensation that something was trailing him, just beyond his vision. His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as he fought to shake off his growing paranoia. A flicker of movement caught his attention in the side mirror this time, a shadow that seemed to dart between the dunes. Jack's heart raced as he pressed harder on the gas, his rig surging forward. He stole another glance at the side mirror and saw it again, a fleeting glimpse of something that should not have been there. A cold sweat coated his palms as he wrestled with his growing fear. The highway stretched before him, unending and empty, a featureless wasteland. He reached for the radio, desperate for some semblance of human contact, but all he heard was static, an eerie undercurrent beneath his frantic calls. As the night deepened, so did his dread. More shadows seemed to materialize at the edges of his vision, always just out of sight. An otherworldly wind whispered through the cracked windows, carrying with it the faintest traces of a mournful wail. Jack's heart pounded in his chest, his breaths coming in ragged gasps. And then, a figure emerged from the darkness ahead, illuminated by the truck's headlights. It was a woman, dressed in tattered clothes that fluttered like rags in the wind. Her hair was a tangled mess and her eyes gleamed with an unnatural light. She stood directly in the middle of the road, a haunting smile curving her lips. Jack slammed on the brakes, his rig screeching to a halt just inches from the woman. His heart hammered in his chest as he stared at her, his mind grappling with the impossible. How had she appeared out of nowhere? The woman's smile widened, and she raised a hand, beckoning him closer. Her voice, a chilling whisper that seemed to echo in his mind, carried on the wind. "You're not alone out here, Jack." Terror held Jack in its icy grip, but something compelled him to obey. He found himself inching the truck forward, drawn to the woman against his will. Her form seemed to flicker in and out of existence, an ethereal presence that defied reality. And then, as if emerging from the very darkness itself, more figures materialized, shadowy shapes that surrounded the truck. Jack's breath caught in his throat as he realized they were not alone. Whispers filled the air, a cacophony of voices that spoke in languages he couldn't understand. In a surge of desperate adrenaline, Jack wrenched the wheel and slammed his foot on the gas. The rig roared to life, tearing through the night with an otherworldly speed. The figures fell away, disappearing into the darkness, but their haunting whispers lingered. For miles, Jack drove, the highway unspooling beneath his tires. Exhaustion and fear warred within him, threatening to drag him into the abyss of madness. And then, as the first rays of dawn painted the sky, the highway spat him out onto the edge of civilization. Trembling and disoriented, Jack stumbled out of his rig, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of the figures. But the desert stood empty and silent, as if the horrors of the night had never transpired. He collapsed onto the ground, his mind a whirlwind of confusion and terror. From that night on, Jack was a changed man. He rarely spoke of the horrors he had witnessed, the figures that had haunted his every thought since. The open road, once a source of solace, had become a place of unspeakable dread. And in the darkest hours of the night, when shadows danced on the edge of his vision, he could still hear their whispers on the wind.